A crying bear brought her dying cub to this man, and the unbelievable happened. It was around 6 in the morning when I opened the door to let in some fresh air. I was barely awake, wearing just my flannel shirt and boots. I was yawning, thinking about coffee, and then I froze. She was there, an adult bear, not in the forest, not on a trail camera, but on my damn porch, less than 10 feet away from me. She wasn't moving, wasn't growling, wasn't charging. She was just there, trembling. Her fur was matted in places, soaking wet. Her eyes, God, her eyes were streaming like a leaking faucet. I'd never seen an animal cry like that. I mean, really cry. Then I saw what she was holding in her mouth. A small ball of fur, limp paws hanging like threads, head lolling to the side. No reaction. I wanted to slam the door shut, grab the old rifle hanging on the kitchen wall, but I didn't. Something about her stopped me. This wasn't a threat. This was a mother, on the edge of something I didn't even know how to name. My heart was racing. I backed up, slowly. She followed. 1 step, 2 steps, then she gently laid her cub down on the wooden porch floor. She backed away, sat down, never taking her eyes off me. Against all common sense, I knelt down. Every instinct, every story, every warning was screaming no, but I did it anyway. I leaned over the cub. It looked dead, barely bigger than a loaf of bread. Its ribs were jutting out. One ear was covered in dried blood. And then I saw it. An imperceptible but real breath. Its chest was rising faintly. I looked at the bear. She was following my every move. I said, like an idiot, but it just came out, "I'll try, okay?" She didn't move. I wrapped the cub in my flannel shirt, heart pounding, and went inside the house. The bear stayed there, motionless, as if she knew something I didn't. Inside, I laid the cub on the couch. Towels, heating pad, water bottle. I gathered everything that came to mind. It was cold, limp, but not dead. I glanced out the window. She was still there. I was standing in my living room with a nearly dead bear cub in my arms, thinking, what the hell am I supposed to do now? That's when I understood. This wasn't just a strange encounter with an animal, not simply cute or tragic. This was something else, something that had found me, for better or worse. I wasn't ready, but the bear, she was. She stayed all day on my porch, watching, waiting. The cub, it wasn't finished. It lay there like a pile of wet towels, lifeless, freezing. I dropped to my knees. I pressed 2 fingers against its tiny ribs. Nothing. I leaned in. I breathed in its earthy, wet, bloody fur. Then, very gently, I felt it. A slight rise and fall. A weak breath, but it was there. "You're alive," I whispered. "Jesus, you're alive." I held it tighter in my shirt. I ran to the back room. Space heater, on. Blanket, towel, everything soft around it. A nest. Its breathing was shallow, its back paw stiff, one ear crusted with blood. This was more than exhaustion. Something had happened. A scratching at the window. She was still there. I grabbed my phone, called Robert, a veterinarian, mostly for farm animals. "Robert, it's me. I've got a bear cub. It's badly hurt." Silence. "Have you been drinking?" "No, I'm serious. The mother brought it to me. She laid it on my porch. She's still out there." Long silence. Then, "What the hell? Okay, warm it up. No food, only liquids. Honey water with a dropper. I'll call Sarah." I hung up, found an old jar of raw honey, mixed it with warm water. A meat syringe would do. I gently opened its mouth, dropped in a few drops. A twitch. Its tongue moved. "Come on, stay with me," I said. I sat there for an hour with it, maybe more, talking, humming, cursing. The bear outside didn't move. When I opened the door a crack, she'd lift her head. Our eyes would meet, then she'd lower it again. She trusted me. And that broke me.
Around noon, the cub moved a paw, a tiny stretch. I laughed out loud. Tears were streaming down my face before I even realized I was crying. "You're not dying today, not on my watch." I had no idea what I was doing, but one thing was certain. This cub wanted to live, and I wasn't going to let it go without a fight.
By afternoon, my living room looked like an improvised veterinary clinic. Blankets covered every surface. Towels were stacked everywhere. The space heater was running full blast. The cub was right in front of it, bundled like a newborn. One of its little paws stuck out from the blanket, bleeding again. I examined the wound. A tear, maybe a bite. The skin was swollen and red, obvious risk of infection. I grabbed some hydrogen peroxide, the kind I use for scrapes. I put some on a cloth and gently touched the injured area. It flinched. Pain meant it was still fighting. Outside, I heard a low growl. I glanced out the window. The bear hadn't moved an inch. Her eyes followed my every movement, vigilant yet calm. I cracked the door open. "He's still with us," I murmured. No reaction, just her heavy, steady breathing. I sat back down on the floor beside him and gave him more honey water. His tongue barely moved, but it moved. I kept talking to him softly, trying to cover my own nervousness. My phone buzzed. "Robert." "Sarah says you're crazy, but she's coming. She's bringing medicine." "Thank God," I breathed. "He's still bleeding, and I think he has a fever." "Keep him warm. No sudden movements, nothing solid, and don't leave the door too open." He was right. It was a miracle she hadn't already broken down the walls, but she trusted me. Why? I had no idea. I was just a man, but it was to me she'd entrusted him. Time passed slowly. An hour, then another. The cub was moving more, lifting his head. "Not so fast, little one," I murmured. A sound came from his throat, like a broken toy coming back to life. I smiled despite everything. It was weak, but it was there. I cleaned his paw again. The blood was flowing more slowly. I could work with that. Outside, the bear moved for the first time. 2 steps, then she backed up again. Her body was tense, just like mine. I lit the wood stove. The room became stifling but warm. Night was falling slowly outside. The cub opened one eye. Just one. I swear he looked me straight in the eye. "You're not alone," I whispered. He blinked and fell back asleep. For the first time I thought, maybe he's going to make it. Not a promise, but a maybe. The next morning, I woke up on the floor, neck stiff, head heavy. But the first thing I saw, he was still breathing. Something had changed. His eye was open, and this time it wasn't drifting. It stayed fixed on me. A faint movement of his paw, deliberate. My heart raced. I grabbed my keys. "It's going to be okay, big guy," I said. "Time to get you some help." I wrapped him in a blanket, placed him in a plastic crate lined with towels, and put it on the passenger seat. The mother was still outside. When I came out with the crate, she lifted her head immediately. She started to sit up. Her muscles looked tense, but she didn't move. "I'll bring him back," I promised. She didn't move. I slowly backed down the driveway, every muscle tense. I wanted to help and come back in one piece. The drive to Sarah's office took 40 minutes, but felt like forever. I kept glancing to the side, checking on the cub. His breathing was shallow. I talked to him, murmured, "We're almost there, little one." I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half worried she was following, half hoping. I stopped, ran inside. "Emergency!" I shouted. Sarah came around the corner. When she saw him, she froze. "Where did you find that?" "His mother brought him to me." She pointed to the back room, put him on the table. 2 veteran assistants arrived. "It's a wild cub," one said. "He's not aggressive," I replied. "He's at the end of his rope." Sarah immediately began the examination. Vital signs, breathing, wounds. "This isn't from a fall," she murmured. "Deep bite, probably another male, another bear or a wild boar. It's brutal, but it happens." I swallowed. He'd been hunted, and his mother had defended him, then chosen to trust me. What are his chances? Sarah looked at me. "Slim, but he's fighting, and you brought him in time." She prepared antibiotics and fluids. I stepped back, watching through the glass. The cub twitched, then calmed. Then a breath, another, a shiver, but he was still there. And so were we. The sun was already low when I pulled back into the driveway. The forest around my house was silent, too silent. I cut the engine and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. The plastic crate on the passenger seat containing the cub wasn't moving. He was breathing slowly, steadily, filled with antibiotics and painkillers, but he was alive. I opened the door and got out, and I saw her. She was already there, as if she'd never left. The moment the gravel crunched under my boots, she stood up. Her whole body tense like a bow, muzzle raised, breath loud and dry. She'd heard the truck, maybe even followed. One way or another, she knew. "He's here," I said calmly, hands open in a gesture of peace. I walked around the car and carefully lifted out the crate. Her head was lowered, but she didn't move. No growl, no step forward. I set the crate in the middle of the driveway and backed away. She looked at it, then fixed her gaze on me, then returned her attention to him. I waited. And then she did something I didn't expect. She sat down, less than 10 feet from her cub. She dropped to the ground as if preparing to spend the night there. For a full minute, she didn't even seem to breathe. I whispered, "Why don't you take him? What are you waiting for?" Of course, no answer, only the wind rustling in the trees. Occasionally, an owl called in the distance. The cub stirred, made a weak, raspy sound. His ears twitched. She leaned forward a few inches, then stopped, watching, guarding, waiting. I sat on the porch steps. We were both keeping watch. Minutes passed, an hour. The light melted into twilight. I took a flashlight and checked on him. Still warm, still alive. I tightened the towel around him. She shifted position, but didn't approach. "You're not taking him back tonight, are you?" I murmured. "You want me to keep watching over him? To do your job?" It sounded crazy to say, but maybe it wasn't so absurd. She laid her head on her paws and stayed that way, just outside the cone of light, still awake, still waiting. And somehow I felt it. She wasn't leaving. By the third day, it wasn't just a ball of fur anymore. It was wobbling around clumsily like a drunk raccoon. But it was moving. It was eating from a bowl of mush, a mixture Sarah recommended, dog kibble softened in goat's milk with mashed bananas. It was a real mess, but he was eating. Outside, she was still there. Every morning when I opened the door, she was lying there. Sometimes curled up near the steps, sometimes walking between the trees, but never far. And she was always watching me. I'd set out food and water a few yards away. She never touched it. She didn't want anything from me, except for me to watch over him. And that's what I did. On the 5th day, I got my first visitor. Daniel, my neighbor, arrived in his beat-up pickup. He got out slowly, shotgun visible. "You seen the bear?" he asked right away. "Yeah," I replied. "She's sort of with me." He blinked. "What do you mean?" I explained, or at least tried to, that she'd brought an injured cub, that I'd helped. His expression went from confusion to panic to anger in less than 10 seconds. "This isn't a damn Disney movie," he said. "What if she goes crazy? What about the kids in the neighborhood?" "She hasn't hurt anyone," I shot back. "She just wants her cub to live." But I saw it in his eyes. He was going to tell someone. 2 hours later, a patrol car pulled into my driveway. Deputy Williams got out, calm, thumbs in her belt. "Thomas, you harboring wild animals?" "Not exactly," I replied, and I told her everything. She listened, arms crossed.
When I finished, she said, "You're lucky no one's been hurt, but this is a problem." "She trusts me," I said. "She came to me because she had no one else." "It's still a wild animal," Williams replied. "If this goes wrong, it's on you." I nodded. She stared at me for another moment, then sighed. "I'm not reporting this for now, but you need to end this. Soon."
I thanked her. When she left, I looked toward the bear. She was there, head on her paws, eyes fixed on the window. Inside, the cub was rolling a tennis ball across the floor, awkwardly but with determination. He no longer flinched when I approached. He watched me the way he watched the forest, carefully but peacefully. And I understood. He was no longer just her cub. He was now between two worlds. The knocking on the door was too early, too sharp, too determined. I opened it. Deputy Williams, arms crossed, stern expression. "Tomorrow morning, a state wildlife unit is coming. They're going to tranquilize her and relocate her. If you don't do something, they'll do it their way." The words hit me like a punch. "They said you'd handle it," she added more softly. "Now, time's running out." I nodded slowly, looking past her toward the forest. The bear was still under the pines. She wasn't patrolling, wasn't moving. She was waiting, as always. Williams left. I sat down next to the cub, who was chewing on my boot. Carefree, joyful, safe. "All right, big guy," I murmured. "Time to go home, whether you want to or not." I put him in the crate one last time. Towel, blanket, the bottle of mush mixed with berries. He made a little whimper when we left. I didn't take the direct route. I drove over gravel, through mud, through dense forest, to a place where the trees swallowed everything. I cut the engine, got out, opened the crate. At first, he didn't move. Then he blinked and looked at me as if to say, "What are you doing?" A crack of branches, movement. She was there, not far, maybe 30 feet, in the shadow between the trunks. Her breath formed mist in the cool air. "He's yours," I said softly. She didn't move. The cub struggled out of the crate, stood on all four paws, sniffed the ground, then lifted his head. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Recognition, relief, wariness. Then a sound, not a roar, a raspy call, faint. She moved slowly, head low, body tense. I held my breath, ready to run, but she didn't attack. She approached him, touched his fur with her muzzle, sniffed him completely. He nestled against her. My eyes stung. I wanted to leave, but then she looked at me, not like an animal, like a parent. And then she gently pushed him toward me. He hesitated. She pushed again, gently, encouragingly. He came back to me. I knelt, and he pressed his head against my chest. I murmured, "What are we doing here?" She didn't come closer, didn't push him anymore. Instead, she turned around, walked slowly between the trees, disappeared without a sound. And he didn't follow her. I waited minutes, then hours, but she didn't come back. Not that day, not the next. Never. Only he remained. I built him a small enclosure outside, half open, with logs and things to climb. He hated it. He escaped in less than a week. So he stayed around. He came and went, slept under the porch, disappeared during the day, came back at night to the sound of the food bowl. He wasn't a pet, not tamed, but not wild either. He belonged to no world and to both at once. I often saw him sitting motionless for minutes in the grass, staring into the distance. Sometimes he'd fix on a tree for hours, muzzle twitching, ears alert. He was waiting. He was hoping. For her. Me too. Every night, I sat on the porch with a flashlight and bad coffee. I listened, asked questions, hoped. Sometimes something rustled in the darkness. Footsteps, breathing, but no one came. I didn't call it paranoia anymore, just a habit. Then one night, a dead rabbit at the edge of the forest. Fresh, intact, no tracks, no scavengers. A gift. That same night, he paced back and forth, whimpering softly. Like during the first week, I knew. She was there. She'd watched, checked, she hadn't forgotten him. Maybe that was the point. He was now part of both worlds. He slept at my place, hunted like a wild thing, fought with the neighbor's dog, and climbed trees like a shadow. He belonged nowhere, and yet here, with me. I always leave the porch light on. I set out bowls at the edge of the woods, not because I think she'll come back, but because I know she won't. But what matters, that stubborn, wild, courageous fragment of her, with those big eyes, that stays, and it's enough. But I wouldn't be honest if I didn't say this. Every time the wind shifts, when the night gets too quiet, when he lifts his head and stares into the darkness as if he knows something I don't, I get this feeling in the pit of my stomach. Not fear, not hope, just one sensation. This story isn't over yet. What would you have done in Thomas's place? Would you have opened that door? Would you have taken in that dying cub? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're genuinely curious to know. And if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who believes in second chances, in trust between species, in the kind of magic that happens when we choose compassion over fear. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places.